This episode is brought to you by Microsoft. Their AI-powered solutions, including Dragon Medical One, DAX Copilot, and PowerScribe One, enhance clinical documentation and boost radiology accuracy. Microsoft's advanced AI and speech recognition tools streamline processes and improve productivity, ensuring better patient outcomes. Experience secure and efficient healthcare delivery with Microsoft's innovative technology. Visit thisweekhealth.com/Microsoft today and transform healthcare systems with the power of AI.
Today on Keynote.
It's not just about the technology, it's also about changing the care model in the way the bedside nurses work to feel like that virtual nurse is actually a part of the team.
My name is Bill Russell. I'm a former CIO for a 16-hospital system and creator of This Week Health, where we are dedicated to transforming healthcare one connection at a time. Our Keynote show is designed to share conference-level value with you every week. Now, let's jump right into the episode.
Welcome to Keynote, where I have the honor of spending time with MariJo Rugh today. She is the Vice President and CIO of UCHealth Affiliates and UCHealth. What's most impressive about MariJo is 25 years in healthcare IT, bringing a wealth of knowledge and experience in leading complex system implementations and advancing digital transformation in healthcare. We hear about that a lot. We're going to hear firsthand from her today, especially since she's been so instrumental in shaping UCHealth's Affiliate Community Connect program, which is a critical initiative that fosters connectivity and collaboration across health systems. MariJo, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. Good to see you today.
It's good to see you too. I saw you in August, which feels like it was months ago, at our city tour dinner, which is actually the first time we'd had an opportunity to connect. And the way you share stories and the way that you informed, really, the group that was there was so powerful. I said to myself, I want her for a keynote. And so I appreciate you taking the time to share some of your perspectives and stories with us today.
You bet. And like I said, thanks for having me.
Of course. Over 25 years in healthcare. And while we look back and say, we haven't been doing that this long, the fact is we have, and it's because we can. And I think about you sharing your journey into healthcare IT, what drew you to it as a field, and more importantly, what has propelled you to stay and make such an impactful difference in this industry?
Yeah, I found myself working my first job, my first real job out of college was as a med tech or laboratory scientist, as we call them today. Sounds much better than med tech. But anyway, I was going into work every day and worked in microbiology. And I just realized that while I loved science and I loved the aspects of identifying organisms and reading susceptibilities and really having an impact on patients, what I really was missing was working with people. So I found myself thinking, what do I want to do? I knew that I did not want to work in the laboratory for the rest of my career. So somebody reached out to me from Cerner, now Oracle, and said, hey, I'm working there and I think you should think about coming over to Cerner. And so I interviewed for a position, moved over to Kansas City, started working there, doing a lot of traveling for Cerner, doing implementations, and I just absolutely loved it. So that's what got me into IT, was doing implementations. So I spent a few years there and then ended up working for a healthcare provider, and that's all she wrote. I've just been in healthcare IT ever since then. And like I said, what really got me there is I just really enjoy working with people. So when we talk about working in IT, it's not the technology that gets me there. It's really more, again, about the people and helping them be more effective at their job by using technology.
And on that theme, what are some of the biggest trends and challenges you've seen over the years? Like when you first started your career, how is it different from what you're experiencing today, and how have you learned to navigate that successfully?
Yeah, my first big implementation of, at the time, CPOE, was really about just transcribing orders off of paper and addressing legibility. And that really didn't do anything for providers. It made them slower. But the positive thing was the laboratory would get an order that was legible, and the pharmacy would get a medication order that also was legible. But it didn't do anything for the provider. And so what I've seen over time is we are finally getting to a point where we're asking physicians and clinicians and nurses to do things in the computer where it's not just something additional that they have to do. And it's actually starting to save them time. Some of them would probably argue that we're not quite there yet, but we're getting closer. So I think we've moved from just a transactional documentation system that creates some downstream impact, or it means that I don't physically have to have the chart in front of me to know what's going on with the patient. So it's gone from that aspect to actually starting to create value for providers and nurses. So I think that's the really exciting thing, is that we're now to a point where it's not just going to be, like I said, a documentation system, but it's truly going to make a difference for the clinician and the patient. When I look at how I interact today with my providers and the abilities that I have on the patient portal, the things I can do without ever having to wait on hold or get redirected or listen to a voicemail, ask for somebody to call back. It's so effective for patients now as well, that again, we didn't have that 25 years ago, even 10 years ago when I started in this. We're making great progress.
We are making great progress, especially from an access and engagement perspective, which seems to be on the top of mind for so many CIOs. When you think about the innovation and the projects that you've been able to bring into UC Health, what is top of mind right now? What are some of the things that are literally addressing what you just talked about?
Yeah, I think one of our real game changers is our virtual health center. We have a whole team of incredibly qualified nurses and providers that work in our virtual health center. And we're really changing the care model and making a difference. Literally, when some organizations say they're saving lives, we are saving lives. Now, it hasn't been an easy journey. Many of our clinicians at the bedside have not necessarily been real accepting. It's, yeah, there's somebody on the other end of that camera or a voice back there that they're not really part of my team. And I'm still at the bedside. I know my patient best, so I don't necessarily believe what they're telling me. So we recently implemented a change where, if through the observation in the virtual health center, and we use Epic to support that. And again, we've got algorithms and we've got lots of other technology, including wearable vital sign devices and things that really give the virtual nurse a good idea of what's happening. It's not voodoo or guessing work. It's like they have real good data. So oftentimes they would call the bedside nurse and say, you know what, your patient's declining, and we think you need to potentially call the rapid response team. The nurse would say, there's nothing wrong with my patient, they're fine. And so after a couple of not good outcomes, we actually made a change such that the virtual health nurse could actually take action, not just make a suggestion, but take action and initiate the rapid response team. We actually saw a 20% increase in the use of the rapid response team in one of our hospitals. That seemed like a significant increase, but guess what? We made a difference in the outcome, and we literally saved patients' lives because of making that change. So again, it's not just about the technology or the information that the virtual nurse has access to, but it's also about changing the care model in the way the bedside nurses work to feel like that virtual nurse is actually a part of the team. So that was a pretty significant change, but that's the stuff that really gets me up every day, and just thinking about how we can really extend those key care providers and those experts to patients, not only within UC Health, but outside organizations that want to keep their patients in the community, but they don't have the ICU staff that can actually provide the right level of care, but they can be extended by using our virtual health center. So again, it's a game changer from my perspective. And just not only is it technology and the innovation, but it's changing the way people think and the way they work as well.
When you mentioned that virtual component and being able to extend it outside the community, how does that also complement your Community Connect program and the significance for those organizations and affiliates that are going to learn from, quote unquote, the mistakes that you've shared about, and also provide an expansion of care in the market?
Yeah, so it really does set the foundation, or I guess create the foundation for some of those additional services to be provided. We're not necessarily going into it and marketing those as the reason you should do Community Connect. It's a nice fringe benefit, so to speak, that now you have the ability. But we can quickly, very tangible things that they can do, like telestroke. We were already doing telestroke, and we're doing it with or for organizations that aren't on our instance of Epic. But as soon as you put Epic in there, it's like that's the next level of care, and really provides the additional capabilities and knowledge that telestroke doc can really leverage and improve the care. So it really does create the stage to do some of those additional virtual health, telehealth capabilities that we have. Like I said, part of why we do the Community Connect program is to help patients stay in their community. And but through use of virtual health, we can help them do that. We've got a couple of stories where a patient, Estes Park is one of our Community Connect partners. They're in a mountain town that has a lot of tourism, a lot of folks that are there in the summer but don't live there. And a couple of situations where, because they were on Epic, they had quick access to their health record, even though they lived in Texas or Oklahoma. It just so happens they were on Epic. Not only does it enhance the information exchange between UCHealth and our Community Connect partner, Estes Park, in this situation, but just that Epic to Epic interaction as well is huge. So again, it just brings things that you don't necessarily think about until you really experience it, but it really does. It really is good for the patient and it's good for the providers. We always say we really do it because of the clinical collaboration, but it's not just that. Like I said, there's huge benefits to the patient as well.
When you see more and more merger and acquisition activity occurring, which has an element of divestiture, which seems to often get left out. And so as health systems become the aggregator, the big one in town as an example, what are some key lessons learned from putting Community Connect together, and how has it shaped the evolution of the program to date and where you want to see it go?
One of the things that we've discovered is we're a big organization. We have lots of providers, thousands of providers. We have 1,200 beds. We know a lot about healthcare, right? But we don't know everything. So I think one of the things that we always try to do is also learn from these organizations. And there was a recent situation where we just had to go live at Regional West, Scottsbluff, Nebraska, a small hospital, about 125 beds. And at the go live, or a couple of days later, the Optime analyst came up to me and she said, MariJo, she goes, I knew it was going to be tough for the peri-op area and just pre-admission testing, but she goes, it's worse than I thought. So we started talking about what the situation was, and she said they want to actually use the information that's gathered during the pre-admission testing process and actually have that flow into the anesthesiology providers note. And we've never done anything like that. We don't feel it's appropriate. So I said, let's sit down and let's talk to them about it, because that's what we always try to do, is let's understand why it is they feel this is important. So we really sat down and talked about what they were trying to accomplish the next morning with the provider, as well as the OR team and the pre-admission testing team. And they explained why it's important, that there's a lot of information that nurse gathers in pre-admission that's important to the provider, and that he should know about it as he's prepping that patient for the procedure. So when it was all said and done, what we thought was a really horrible idea, it turned out to be a great idea. And guess what? Our anesthesia providers also thought it was a good idea. So we're going to do that same thing across UCHealth. So I think that's one of those really positive unintended consequences that we were able to realize as we do this program, and we do it in more and more organizations.
Here's the thing. You are sharing what it means to have a learning organization, even if that means occasionally a mistake and not necessarily a life-dependent mistake is being made. Even in 2023, you shared with us about learning from mistakes. And so if missteps can lead to significant improvements in your programs, then the intent and the importance is there. But how do you bring your clinicians especially into that mix? Are you using governance models, review boards? Like, where's the environment that being able to have a misstep and have continuous learning applied to what's happening inside your org, or even with your Community Connect partners? Where are those conversations happening?
Yeah, so we have very much a shared governance. And some organizations that, even without a Community Connect program, struggle with shared governance across their hospitals. We've stepped up, I think, and are probably more advanced than some organizations that are multi-system. And a few years ago, we realized that the only way we can really create a patient experience that means it's the same regardless of which door they enter. We started to create that shared governance, which means we have expertise or representation from every hospital, every pharmacy to a certain extent. But again, we've stood up that shared governance prior to doing Community Connect. And now as we are doing Community Connect, we just invite them to the table. So it is a little bit difficult because sometimes they don't understand the importance of or the significance, but we literally have it written in the contract that you will participate in our governance. You will help us make decisions. The other aspect of that is, back to the UCHealth side, is oftentimes we head down a path We have a project that we're doing for UC Health, and I have to stand up, or someone on my team has to stand up and say, time out. How is this going to impact our affiliate Community Connect partners? It's made us, I think, a better organization because we do have to step back sometimes and consider not only how is it going to work within our organization across the multiple regions, but also how is it going to work in those Community Connect smaller hospitals. And oh, by the way, we have small hospitals in our organization as well. So sometimes they get left behind, or they did. So it allows our smaller hospitals in our own system to also be heard. So it's definitely a shared governance. It's not easy, but it's definitely something that we've grown into ourselves and then have added our Community Connect partners into as well.
I want to stay on the topic of the shared governance, mostly because I've been doing this for 30 plus years. You've been doing it for essentially 25 plus, which means we probably collectively have like over 60 years of experience in this. And yet governance is always part of the conversation. Every summit we host, every city tour dinner we go to, there's the conversation about governance and decision making. And so something like cybersecurity, rising concern, especially with complex system integrations. How does UC Health approach securing patient data and safeguarding systems?
Yeah, it's tough. I think one of the things that we do, in fact, I just got off of a meeting where we're talking about somebody was bringing something new in, and it's what data is going to be shared and or how do they access it. And so one of the things that we've started doing with every piece of software or even every subscription, not exactly subscription, but every third party that we interact with or share data with, or every vendor that hosts data on the cloud, we do a really thorough system and security review. We want to make sure that they've got protocols in place and things that assure that our data is going to be safe. Now, that only goes so far. And sometimes I look at the 25-page system security review that we do, and I'm like, all I want to do is bring in a utility to archive the API data of this, which is now a legacy system. Do I really need a system and security review? Yeah. So again, I think we have really put some structure, some discipline into the process to make sure that we vet any third party that we interact with, as well as I think the other component of that is our employees are probably our biggest risk as well. Just trying to educate our employees on what do phishing attacks look like, and just making sure you don't click on links, and you just can't load an app on your phone and then use it for transcribing patient information into. You really have to think about those things. So in addition to trying to really manage our third-party vendors through, like I said, due diligence, analysis, evaluation of them, we are also really trying to, just like everybody else, educate our employees on what they need to be wary of and make sure they understand the risk. So it's a complex issue, Sarah. I think it's just really scary. I would have never thought even 10 years ago that we would have these kinds of problems around cybersecurity. It's just, we talk about some of the other trends that are growing quickly. I think cybersecurity and what those bad guys are doing, I'm not an expert in it, but how they're really excelling and morphing and changing is what's really frightening. How do we keep up with that? And I don't have great answers, but it's definitely progressing way faster than I ever would have imagined. So I think creating communities to help educate one another, and we're not in this alone. So how do we use our community partners or organizations like yours to help us stay abreast of some of these cybersecurity threats and just know what's coming and be prepared? So it really has become a community problem. It's not just our problem, but like I said, it's a community problem.
And the community beyond even the local market, to your point, when we think about, and Drex shares this on the 2-minute drill, Unhack the News and his podcast and beyond, is assume the bad guys are already there. And
Yep.
they got there by getting there through a human. They rarely are getting in by hacking your systems or hacking the human. So that level of awareness is monumental. You mentioned the APIs, and I had a conversation with the health system that when there was a third-party event this year, and they had to go shut down their APIs to avoid transmitting additional data to a partner who had been compromised, they didn't have the right documentation in their organization to be able to effectively shut down that API for over 6 hours, because the team had done a great job building it, the last thing that any programmer ever wants to do is documentation. And so it took them 6 hours, again, to shut down an API. So you think about all these layers of structure and the importance of the app rationalization. And yes, is the security assessment sometimes overkill, and people are asking about why does it take so long? The answer is actually no, it's not, because here's all the things that could happen. I hear you loud and clear. For all the large language models that we use and the ability to transform healthcare, the bad guys have those same tools and they get to focus on only that. Now, if you told me the only thing you did all day was focus on how to keep your organization safer, more resilient, and more capable of keeping the bad guys out, then who would be doing all of the other things that you have behind you every single day?
Yep, totally agree.
So when you think about these new technologies, and AI gets overused, except that it really is everywhere, and we've been using it for years. It just happens to be the forefront, although we talk about many things. How are you preparing for these advancements with the security lens, with the community lens, with the things that need to come in as potential point solutions? Ideally, they integrate with the EMR effectively. How are you preparing the organization and bringing the new ideas in a way that they are potentially better received and better adopted versus just, I'm sure in different perspectives, shiny objects come your way every single day?
Yeah, we're trying to be very strategic in how we use AI and how we're thinking about it. We definitely want to use it from a efficiency perspective. How can we make a doc more efficient? We don't want to replace the doc. We don't want to replace the nurse, but how can we make them more effective? That's what's driving, at least on the clinical side. Now, I've also recently had some conversation with our CHRO, and she's really looking at it as to how can we retain talent? How can we recruit talent even? How can we reduce our turnover rates? I think there's a lot of ideas that are swirling out there, which are good ideas. And so then how do we distill that into what do we want to do? What do we want to focus on? So we are trying to be very thoughtful. We're trying to do our research, learn from others, leverage other companies to provide some advice. And then, like I said, be very thoughtful. The other aspect of it is many states are looking at just legislation and making sure that AI isn't used in a way that creates biases, or particularly on the human space. And again, the HR avenues. So again, we are evaluating that right now, pulling our legal team in so we can have an awareness of what we need to be thinking about as we put it into place. So we've got a lot of ideas out there right now. We are actually applying it in some ways over on the clinical side. Haven't gotten there so much on the people side yet. But again, eventually it'll just become a part of every application. We don't see it as we don't need an AI committee. It needs to be an organic part of all of our applications and how we apply it no differently than other tools that we've implemented throughout the years. Now, again, figuring out, is it safe? I was at a conference last week and it's like they were talking about hallucinations and the things that are happening in that space. And so you got to be thoughtful about it. And yeah, that stuff is going to happen. But again, you have to be thoughtful how you use it, how you implement it, and make sure that you're thinking through I always like to say, are there any unintended consequences that aren't good ones, and need to think through those.
And even one of my mentors, truly, she is a lawyer for a firm that specializes in healthcare law, but also recently in AI, because her whole perspective is, if you have a strong governance model, like you were talking about, what is the audit trail? How are you making sure that AI is producing the results that you can stand up for, in her case, in court? And from a perspective of the technologist or the CIO coming in, it's the layers that need to come in with these solutions may include general counsel, third-party risk, audit. They've always been a part of the conversation. It has a different level of importance today than it ever has before.
Totally agree. It'll be interesting to see. They say it's moving so quickly. So that's probably the scariest part, is that it's moving so quickly. So do we have time to get some of those things in place and address those concerns and risks? And so I think that's what organizations have to be careful of, is that they don't rush it, regardless of how quickly it's moving. Just be thoughtful and do a 360 review of it and make sure that you're moving forward with the right things.
When you think back on either implementations, initiatives, projects, however you want to go about thinking it, what are some that you look back on that are hallmarks in your mind of everything went right with that project, or I'm not going to do that again because this happened in this project. As you think about some of the things you've done successfully in your career or lessons learned from a benchmark in your mind perspective, what are things that you think back to that allow you to make some really good decisions today?
Yeah, I think just overall, the Community Connect, when I look at like the first hospital, we've been doing clinics for a long time. That's much easier to do. It's not easy, but it's less difficult, I guess I should say, than hospitals. But when we did the first hospital implementation, it was 2019. It was right before COVID started and did a lot of things wrong, but we selected a really good partner. The hospital that agreed to do this with us knew that we were the first. And oh, by the way, this was after a failure. We had done one previously and basically both parties decided it wasn't going to work. This, in a way, was our second attempt, but we were much more thoughtful this time in selecting our partner. We were much more forthright in there's things that we haven't encountered. We know how Epic works. We know how it's used in our organization, but we're not exactly sure how it's going to translate to your organization. You manage your providers, and you might manage them differently than what we do. So there's a lot of risk around that, but these are the expectations. We tried to really say, physicians not entering orders. That's not an option. So we did at least try to go in and say, we realize that there's differences, but these are the things that can't be different. So we really worked through that. We experienced a lot of pushback, but yet at the same time, we had selected the right partner to really work with us. And I say partner, I'm moving away from the term affiliate Community Connect and really calling them a partner because they really are. And if they don't think of themselves as being a partner with us as we go through this journey and implementation of our instance of Epic, it's probably not going to work out. So that's part of what we really continually say is we're doing this together. We will be successful together, but we really are partnering in this. So that was different than how we'd approached it with the first. And I think they didn't see us as a partner. They saw us as a vendor. There were some other things that had happened in the organization that also contributed. But at the end of the day, we are very careful now. And I think using that first success as the example is to make sure they realize as we move forward that they're partners. Fast forward, we did another implementation, small critical access hospital in Nebraska. That's where I grew up, so I love doing work out there. Farmer ranchers are the guys that you see in the waiting room or in radiology getting a chest x-ray. So fast forward, it's now 2020. We're in the middle of COVID. So again, navigating through that implementation while we had COVID going on was just another huge success and not something that I would want to do again, but just working through that with them and really partnering with them, navigating the challenges with staff being scared to go out there. They're not wearing masks. What do I do? You remove yourself from the situation and you go into a conference room where you feel safe with a mask on. So just those little things that I think when I look back were huge challenges and huge distractions, but yet we were still successful. Yeah, who would have ever thought that we could go live with more of a completely virtual analyst team behind the scenes. And now that's become our norm. So things that we thought we had to do during COVID, we realized are actually really great things to do. Like I said, we used to bring the whole team on site, but because of COVID and trying to reduce the risk to our teams, we decided to do most of our command center and analysts remote. Like I said, that was a success that now is a practice that we've taken forward, and it ended up being a win for everybody.
And I love hearing that story. Hey, you don't always have to be right there to make things happen. And so there's been this trend for people coming back to the office. There's also been this expectation that if you work maybe remotely, you're always available, and how much faster technology is going. How do you balance that expectation with your team?
Yeah, some folks can balance it more than others. I do continually say, and I even look at my own work habits, and I don't want them to think that my work habits, that I have the same expectations of them. I've learned to do things like schedule emails during regular business hours. Don't send them out at 5 a.m. when I'm up. You know what I mean? Don't try to make them think that you have those same expectations and that you don't have to be online 12 hours a day. So I do try to make sure that my habits reflect at least what I communicate with them and when, that it reflects what I would expect of them. like I said, I try to model what I'm doing, even though it's not exactly what I'm doing, but they can perceive it that way by doing different things. I try to help with those expectations. But I also think setting boundaries and just saying, look, I've got time on my calendar or do not disturb. And so I think I've got a new manager right now, for example, and he's like, how do you deal with all the emails? And I go, I've told my people, you included, that if you really want me to respond to your email, you put what's important and what I need to interpret quickly at the very beginning of the email. I try to always tell people or make sure the subject line is appropriate. If it's an email thread, like where there's 5 emails, pull to the top what's important to them, especially if you need an action from them. So I think there's things that we can coach our people on, also help introduce some of those best practices, being virtual, and just really lead by example and help them know it's okay to set boundaries. Yeah, we work hard. When we've got to go live, you're expected to be available, whatever your shift is, because we work 12-hour shifts, but that's not the norm. So I think balancing that, but then also recognizing, because I think one of the things we do at UCHealth is we just move so quickly and we just go from project to project, but really also taking time to acknowledge, look, guys, this was a huge accomplishment that we did as a team. And we couldn't have done this individually, but we did it as a team. So I think helping people understand also that they're not just performing as an individual, but they are part of a team. So that means you should be able to rely on your team members. It's not just on your shoulders. Again, not any real answers, because I do know some people with the virtualness, myself included, you find that you're online more and you just have to figure out how to create those boundaries but also coach your people to help them understand how they need to do it as well.
With you setting the example that way, about time of day, about celebrating the wins when they are happening, are you finding that type of supportive and collaborative culture creates the right motivation for the team in this always on environment? We've always been always on, and the projects are coming faster and faster. And to your point, the complexity of what it takes to launch something is so much greater than it was before. What are some of those key elements, though? If I asked your team, hey, what makes you excited about work every day? What about your team keeps you going? What would they say?
Yeah, I think we create a sense of family, number one. I think it's important that we all get to know one another. And so I think doing fun things together, which I need other people to help me make those things happen with the team and do in-person meetings to try to, like I said, create that sense of family, even though we're all located in different regions, different areas of Colorado, some are in different states. That's normal for many companies. But I think, like I said, just working together, helping them understand what their roles and responsibilities are, that we're a team. I always like to say, if we are a basketball team, not everybody can be the center, right? We all have different positions. So I think helping them also understand what they are responsible for, but also you don't just draw a line in the sand. We're here to help one another. We fill gaps. So if we see a gap and it might not be in our lane or in our position, then let's help one another out. So again, I like to feel that my teams do have a sense of family and that we're here to help one another. And if somebody's having an issue with a family member and they need to be late for a call or they can't facilitate a meeting, that there's always someone there to fill in for them. And so I think I've been able to create that culture, not just me, myself, but I think with the group that I've got and just trying to really message the importance of family, that it's like, guys, I had kids. One of my PMs one morning said, I'm really sorry, MariJo, but I got to go pick my son up from daycare. And I'm like, been there, done that, go. So it's like, you really have to also acknowledge that we all have things outside of work, right? We have families. And so while your job is important and you're important to UCHealth, your family is also important as well. So like I said, I guess if I were to give one message there, it's really creating family and making people want to be a part of the family.
It's nice when you know that somebody has your back and can cover for you when you need it, especially when you have things that you need to take care of. And it could be picking somebody up from daycare, could also be, heck, not having to take 4 hours of PTO to go to the dentist anymore and being able to understand, I'm gonna be gone for 4 hours and I have to go do this. And someone's, I got you. Don't worry about it. We can handle it. And it's nice to know that we have that flexibility in so many of our environments. I want to take a look ahead with you as you think about some of the long-term goals that you have for UCHealth and what you want to achieve.
Yeah, I think most of my career has been so very focused on clinical applications and EMRs and clinicians and docs and technologists. I think what we've realized through COVID is just the importance of our employees. And so I think with the turnover rates that we're experiencing while we're making a small dent in it, we really have to stay focused on our employees, because guess what? If we take care of our employees, then we're going to take good care of our patients. So I think while there's certainly technologies out there that will improve patient care or allow us to do things different that will improve patient outcomes, I also think that we in healthcare also need to remember to take care of our employees. So as we look at how can we make their life easier, that's really going to be a focus of mine, probably to take me to the end of my career, where not only does the patient come first, but our employee needs to come first. Why should an employee have to go into SharePoint and enter an issue in a SharePoint app for when they have a facilities issue? And then they have to go over here to actually enter an incident into our incident management system that we use in IT. So just like we need an integrated medical record, where it doesn't matter if the patient was seen in clinic or if the patient was seen in the ED and admitted, it's all an integrated record. We need to think the same way for our employees. So again, really trying to create an integrated platform that makes our employees' lives easier, and again, make them want to work at UCHealth is really one of the things I want to focus on over the next few years. Of course, I have the Affiliate Community Connect program, which is always going to be in my scope, but I'm just getting, probably over the last few years, I've gained more of an appreciation and a realization that we really need to take care of our people and create systems that are integrated for them. Said that a couple of times, but also just so that they're effective and have transparency into what's happening with my ticket. I don't even know. It's like it went into a black hole. How many times do you hear that? And give them the visibility to actually know the status of the issue or the situation so that they can feel like they know what's going on and don't have to worry about it so much, or come up with workarounds. Nurses are the best at workarounds. And it's just oftentimes because they have no choice. So hopefully we can avoid them having to create workarounds if we can give them visibility and turnaround times and not have to go 5 different places to get things done. So like I said, that's a focus for me. That's probably not all healthcare IT leaders, but I really have made that a priority. And like I said, as I look at the next few years, that's going to continue to be in my forefront.
Which is so important because, to your point, is it easy to be a patient? Is it easy to be an employee? And that lens of saying it should be easy to do business here from any aspect is really key. When people are having those great experiences, then they're going to find ways for others to do it too. And research has shown us over the years, an employee knows within the first 2 weeks of joining a new company,
Yep.
if they made the right decision. Because if you show up on day one and your computer's not ready and you can't log in and your desk isn't ready, or if you're virtually can't get into the systems, what does that say about the rest of how your company is organized? And so for you to be leading with that as one of the things that's really important, yeah, they're going to want to stay there because they're seen, they're heard, they matter. And going to work is more arduous than it needs to be simply by the industry that we're serving. So what a fantastic perspective. What advice are you going to give to somebody who says, MariJo, I want a career in healthcare and technology. I want to be a CIO. What do you share with them?
Yeah, I think it's just, for me, it's just the fundamentals. It's be honest, be transparent, be flexible, make sure you listen. I actually was interviewing someone today and I'm like, oh my gosh, I realize he's in an interview and he wants to make sure that we understand. But I'm like, I don't know if this guy could listen based upon what I'm hearing. I think it's just really important to walk into every situation, even though I've got 25 years of experience, you've got 30. How many times do you learn something new every day, right?
Yeah.
So as you walk into a situation, don't assume that you know where they're coming from. Don't assume that you know what their issue is or what their problem is. So ask questions, listen, and learn. And then I think back to that mistake mentality. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to admit this was the wrong decision, but we're going to course correct. And this is where we're going now, because nobody's perfect. We always realize things and we learn. So be okay admitting that was a mistake or that was the wrong direction to take. And quite frankly, if you find yourself in a situation of which I have, where I couldn't be those things, I couldn't be honest, I couldn't be transparent, I couldn't admit I'd made a mistake, I had to leave the organization. So if you find you're in that situation, it's probably not the right organization for you. Again, be able to be you, but from my perspective, you need to be those things I mentioned, which is honest, transparent, and there's always a level of flexibility and compromising that you're always going to have to make. And then I think the other aspect is, and I've seen this in some situations, but just make sure that you are guiding the organization based upon what they need and not necessarily what your career aspirations may be. So again, if your career aspirations, if you want to do something, but you know in the back of your mind, it's not the right thing to do for your organization, but you want that experience, then you can probably go work someplace else that will allow you to get that experience. So again, do what the organization needs you to do and not necessarily what you want to do from a career perspective. Because in the end, with the situation of our healthcare organizations today, 70% of hospitals in Colorado right now, today, have margins that are unsustainable. So as a healthcare CIO, you need to be helping them make the right decisions for their organization to keep their doors open. So like I said, guiding them to make the right decisions and helping them keep their doors open is something that all healthcare CIOs need to take very seriously. And it's not that way in other industries. So I think that's a differentiator, is we do really have a responsibility for organizations like these that are different than a startup organization or a cybersecurity software company. Because I feel we have a different responsibility. And so I think you need to go into the position with that understanding.
Being honest with yourself as much with your organization, pretty darn key. Thank you for that perspective. And to your point, you got to understand the finance and operations because it's so much more than the technology today.
Yeah.
All right. Are you ready for speed round?
Yeah.
Okay. What is one tech gadget or tool you cannot live without?
Oh gosh. I would say my AirPods. Very basic, but it allows me to multitask. Like I can pop my AirPods in, I can call my kids, they're all out of the house, or I can call one of my friends I haven't talked to. I can either cook or I can clean up after my husband has cooked, and I couldn't live without them.
You tell people that too. Hey, I'm riding my bike. Hey, I'm doing dishes. Hey, I'm doing laundry. So they know you've got me and I'm also doing other things at the same time. What's your go-to activity for unwinding after a long day?
Say taking Gus for a walk. He's my dog. I can't run at the end of the day. I always have to do that earlier in the day. But again, it's just a kind of a 30 minutes or not even 30 minutes. It might be 20. It's just a time to get outside. I love the outdoors. Get outside, just like decompress a little bit, think about the day and prepare a little bit for the next day. Visit with neighbors if they're out. Also take my mind off of work. So yeah, I would say just taking Gus for a walk or a smell, because he does lots of smelling. So it's a smell with some walking along the way. But
And you may get to stop and smell the roses literally along the way too, and maybe your earbuds in to help out. That's funny. We had a dog as he got older. That was all. It was a take him out to sniff. He really didn't go very far, but he certainly enjoyed the outdoors. Okay, if you could work remotely from anywhere in the world, where would it be?
yeah, that's a tough one for me. I haven't done a ton of traveling, at least outside the United States. So I don't think I could choose a place. I think I would want to go work maybe like in the Swiss Alps for 3 months, maybe in Iceland for a few months, because those are areas that I haven't necessarily experienced. Iceland is obviously very different than Switzerland, but I think I would want to go to multiple places and just bounce around. I don't think I could choose one.
I do appreciate that. I can tell you're from Colorado because you're like, both those places are potentially very cold and have mountains in your pipe. Whereas I'm thinking like, oh no, I need palm trees, I need sunshine, I need the ocean. That's great. And my last question for you in speed round, if you could instantly solve one healthcare challenge, the snap of your fingers, what would it be?
What is frustrating, and I think also impacts experience of patients and physicians and employees, is there's so many regulatory things that are put in place that try to fix a problem and sometimes just end up creating other problems. So I think if I could fix something, it would be, could we implement regulations in a way that doesn't create inefficiencies or add expense? I get the need for it, but for example, I scheduled a patient via my mobile app last night. And then this morning I pick up my phone and it says, your estimate is available. That's a regulatory thing that we've had to put in place, but it's added expense to healthcare and it's added some other problems as we tried to implement that. I'm probably again, this truly is a magic wand moment because there's no way to fix this. But I do feel like there's a lot of things that we have to do in healthcare around regulation that just creates expense and inefficiencies and challenges that nobody really wants to deal with. Like I said, I don't know how to fix it other than if I had a magic wand. So yeah.
It's a good problem to solve, and I appreciate you being a keynote today. Thank you for sharing your journey, what you're doing at UC Health, and every other initiative that you are bringing forward into our industry, into our communities, and taking the time to share that with our listeners. I look forward to being able to do this with you again next year, and we get to talk about a whole new set of challenges, opportunities, and things that you have continued to solve through your philosophies, through your leadership, and through your expertise. Thank you again for being on the show today.
Again, thanks for having me, Sarah. Good conversation. I appreciate your feedback and just your perspective as well. Always good.
Thanks for listening to this week's keynote. If you found value, share it with a peer. It's a great chance to discuss and in some cases start a mentoring relationship. One way you can support the show is to subscribe and leave us a rating. Love it if you could do that. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.